Welcome to the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week ADSW live web series. I'm Jörg Dorler. I'm a partner with Monitor Deloitte based in Riyadh, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. ADSW live web series is a global initiative championed by UAE and Masdar, the sustainability powerhouse within the UAE. And key objective is helping to shape the renewable agenda, as it's going to create a lot of opportunities going forward. Energy transition is one of the key topics of today's society, going far beyond the energy industry. I think everybody's still driving towards net zero targets. Most countries in the region have set fairly aggressive targets with respect to this. Society and countries still try to achieve the Paris Protocol. That means limiting global increase in temperature to 1.5 centigrades maximum. And that's a very challenging task. This also becomes even more important as COP28 is going to take place in a few weeks from now here within the region. And that's why we decided to assemble that panel to give you a short perspective of certain challenges and opportunities as we see them as part of that energy transition journey. I'm very happy to welcome today with me, very honored to speak to Carlos Gasco Travesedo, who is Energy Policy Advisor and Executive Director, Energy Policy at the Abu Dhabi Department of Energy, Alicia Eastman, President of Intercontinental Energy, as well as Hamed Ahrari, Managing Director of Verbund Green Hydrogen. Again, thank you very much for finding the time. I just briefly outlined the objective of today's session and the topic more broadly. Now I would like to ask, our speakers kind of to give a short intro statement, starting on with Carlos, kind of maybe sharing your perspective and also maybe outlining your role within that as part of the Abu Dhabi Department of Energy.
Indeed, thank you very much, Jörg, for your a very precise introduction, which will help everybody understand the nature of the challenge that we are facing. Indeed, the Department of Energy is a policymaker and the regulator of the energy sector of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, which is, roughly speaking, 70% of the UAE. It's also clearly a very relevant energy hub. And as such, we like to think that the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and the UAE in general are at the forefront of the energy transition in the region. And we have, I think, a quite robust and proven track record that is based on high-level strategic and policy decisions to actually deliver an energy transition for the Emirate, which will be able to meet its targets in terms of clean and renewable energy penetration in the systems in a sustainable way, not only from a economic and environmental point of view, but also from a social point of view. Because at the end of the day, the predictability and the capability of the system to adapt to a whole new economy based on the gradual reduction of emissions without losing economic growth is, at the end of the day, what a policymaker has to deliver. That is exactly what we try to do, and we're happy to do here in the DOE. I think this my role as executive director is I have 3 directors working with me, which help us shape the policies, the decisions that will drive the energy sector of Abu Dhabi to a sustainable future, as I said, in a predictable, smooth, and competitive way. Is very challenging, is very difficult from an economic, from a social, and from a technical point of view, but it's fascinating, and living it from my position here is actually, I think, a gift. So for that, I'm more than happy, to participate in the efforts of the Emirate. I think I can leave it here, and I'm more than open to further discussion and questions, obviously.
Yeah, Carlos, thank you very much. And now handing over to Alicia also for a few introductory words.
Great. Thank you, Jörg, and thank you, ADSW and Masdar, for hosting this. My name is Alicia Eastman. I'm the president of Intercontinental Energy. We basically we develop, we build, and we operate large-scale green hydrogen, green ammonia facilities in Western Australia and in the Middle East. So we have a 26 gigawatt upstream wind and solar facility in Northwest Australia, which will produce about 1.8 million tons per annum of hydrogen or 10 million tons per annum of ammonia. And that project, BP joined last year to be the operator. And we've sort of duplicated that project in Oman, which also has the same diurnal profile that Western Australia has. So it's a vast desert. It's located on a body of water, and you have a very strong sun during the day and very strong wind at night, which creates a 24-hour availability. And when you can increase the capacity factor and you can increase throughput, which really reduces the price of the projects. And the reason we went after large projects is also stems from the same thing. We believe that if we can get the price down as low as possible, we'll obviously have more people taking it up sooner. So all of the projects are very large scale. They all have that desert diurnal profile, coastal desert diurnal profile. And we've brought in operators to eventually manage the projects, people who have experience in major projects. So we also have an MOU with Aramco for Saudi. And our second project in Australia, we just announced an MOU with KEPCO. And that project is extremely large. It's 50 gigawatts or more of upstream wind and solar. So our point of view is that hydrogen is quite difficult to, in many ways, it's very difficult to transport or store, even though it was the reason most people wanted to shift from electrons, which are also very difficult to transport and store. And we found that ammonia is actually a lot easier. And so we are looking at markets that can use ammonia as ammonia first. And then if it needs to be cracked back, a lot of those technologies are coming along to more efficiently crack back to hydrogen. Gives you a little bit of background of where I'm coming from when we have further discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Alicia. Now handing over to Hamed for his initial view.
Thank you very much, Jörg. Good afternoon to everybody. So thanks for inviting me to this session. Just a few words to myself, to my role. I am responsible for the hydrogen business at Verbund, and in this role also the managing director of a new entity, Verbund Green Hydrogen. Verbund is Austria's largest electricity producer. And the interesting fact is that our production portfolio is green by 97%. And by going more and more into the hydrogen business, we are extending our value chain actually. And I would like to share a few observations with you, which I find interesting and at the same time very pleasing, because when we were talking about hydrogen in such rounds just 12, 15 months ago, there was always the question about, does it make sense at all? Can we afford it? Or why is hydrogen essential and what is the actual role of it? And now what I observe is that we don't have these discussions any longer. We are currently discussing not anymore about the should we do it, it's rather about the how should we do it and what is the time plan looking like, what is the set of players that we are needing, and what is the target picture supposed to look like. And the target picture is very depending on the demand side. When you look at the demand that we have in our part of Europe, you see a very, very high increase that you can also explain very well. So it will actually, when you look just at the Austrian demand, currently we have around 160,000 tons of gray hydrogen. Same amount will be green in 2030, and it will go to 600,000 in 2035 and to 1.8 million in 2040. And this is enough to fill a pipeline of 36 inches, by the way. So we need to do something. And that means we need to act in the short term. but we also have to make sure that we set the basis for the long-term import of hydrogen, because this part of Europe will be highly dependent on importing large volumes of hydrogen at affordable costs and prices. So first of all, when it comes to the short-term projects that we have here, we need to decarbonize the existing gray hydrogen demand. So where we need to move out of all the pilot stages in our projects, it needs to get bigger, because before you build a gigawatt, you at least should have built 50 megawatts or 100 megawatts. So this is what we are currently doing and going towards that target picture. And the other bigger and also decisive point is to make sure that we can import hydrogen for the long term. And there, of course, Middle East plays a big role for us. And there, it is nothing else than building this hydrogen economy. It's not the one-by-one relationship that we are currently building up. It's building up a whole economy where we alone are not able to do it, of course. And that's what brings in the element of partnerships. So we are currently looking for partnerships, also setting up a lot of partnerships in order to make sure that we can push all that through the door, so to say. And with all that said, you of course need the element of orchestrating all the efforts, but you also need the public sector. Public sector will play a very, very decisive role in all that, building up the hydrogen economy. And that means accompanying the whole process from the beginning until we launch the boat, so to say.
Thank you very much, Hamed, for this one. And I think, yeah, you gave a keyword already, good keyword on the public sector role coming over to regulations and policies. And I think a lot of players in the market say, you know, we can't do that. We can't build a new system if we don't have that support, kind of setting certain standards and the basis for that. And also going back to Carlos, because I think it's heart of your job, of what you're doing. What's kind of your view on that? What are kind of the key policies and regulations based on your experience where you say, you know, that's really important, where from an Abu Dhabi Department of Energy, you see, you know, this is what we really need to put in place so that that energy transition can be successful.
Thank you, Jörg. I think what is necessary in Abu Dhabi is not really different than what is necessary anywhere else. At the end of the day, decarbonization of the economy is not a regional issue or a emirate issue or even a national issue. It is a global task. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that the emissions of the overarching economy are reduced in a consistent way to meet the net zero 2050 future, which we have agreed to fulfill here in the UAE. So to do that, we just have to continue pushing for the already ongoing initiatives, and obviously we need to bring new initiatives, new policies, new decisions, new strategies and regulations that will complement the efforts that we have already ongoing. At the end of the day, is the energy sector that has to reduce all of its emissions, and we are actually very strong already in the commitment that relates to the electricity and water sector of Abu Dhabi. We have recently approved a legally binding target that stipulates that 60% of all our electricity in 2035 will be clean, meaning no emissions related to it, which actually translate into a per unit reduction of 75%, because you need to understand that the demand will continue to grow. That we will achieve basically by means of investing heavily in clean technologies like nuclear, PV and storage, but also the decoupling of the thermal desalination plants, which we have in the Emirate, which require CO2 emissions to produce water, which is, as you can imagine, pretty relevant here. On top of that, we have a very specific, very comprehensive agenda from the supply, from the demand, from the behavioral change, from the public debate, with from every angle, what is it that the Emirate needs to achieve to actually get there. So we have been working on a very relevant piece, which will be hopefully published pretty soon, which is a 2050 energy outlook that looks at the future of the Emirate in terms of supply and demand of energy of all kinds, not only electricity, and what efforts are going to be required. What happens, and for that we have three scenarios. What happens if we don't do much, or we just continue with the plans as we have them today? And that doesn't take us to net zero. That means that we need to continue pushing for additional efforts in the transport, in the buildings sector mostly, in the agriculture as well. And then we have two additional scenarios which will take us based on pure economics, which delay the action towards the last third of the period of time, basically taking into consideration the economies of scale and the learning curves of the technologies that will help, like hydrogen, for instance, sustainable hydrogen. And we have a technology-driven, more expensive, let's say more ambitious at the beginning, which will take us to net zero faster. But based on all those things, I think we need to continue pushing. We have been very active. For instance, we have an EV charging policy that is in place. We have a certificate scheme that allows the demand to harness all the benefits of having clean energy, which is very important for for the companies like ADNOC or EGA or Emirates Steel, which want to have a clean energy mix for their products. We have also very ambitious demand side management strategy and energy efficiency strategy that wants to reduce energy and water demand by 30% by 2030. We have also a pilot on time of use tariffs, which will have an important impact on the behavior of consumers, both residential, commercial, agricultural, and industrial. We're working on a clean energy target for the electricity sector for 2050. In other words, we have a holistic approach to this based on science, based on modeling tools, which we have sophisticated modeling tools that tell us how we're going to get there. And we do this based on our knowledge and the alignment that we receive from the different stakeholders of the economy and the energy sector of Abu Dhabi. We put all the bits and pieces together, and we have a very promising, very challenging, very demanding, potentially complicated at times, but actually also full of opportunities. And I will reiterate, one of these opportunities is the role of hydrogen, sustainable hydrogen, as an energy vector, which we think has also a very positive future in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi.
No, thanks a lot, Carlos, for that very extensive explanation, description of the different activities and policies in place. And now moving over to Alicia on the same topic, but obviously different angle. I mean, Alicia, you are in a commercial organization, not in a regulator and a government body, right? And there, if you read through the press, there have been a lot of discussions. When is hydrogen viable? What's really needed? Is that kind of sustainable? You mentioned kind of Oman, similar to Australia, where you can essentially produce 24 hours due to the favorable profile of sun during the day and wind at night. So what do you see as a commercial company, also with investments from BP, where say, that's what we need from a regulatory perspective to be able so that we can continue running our business in a successful way?
Well, I think the most important thing that has to happen is this internalization of negative externalities. And by that, I mean, there needs to be a price on emissions. Otherwise, behavior won't change. If we are continuing to consider fossil fuels as being cheap because they don't actually take on the costs of what they're doing to the environment or to the health outcomes of people living near the refineries or many of the things that basically society pays for. So these companies are producing cheaply, but that is because they have basically internalized all the profits and they've socialized all the real expenses, the negative externalities. So that really needs to change, and people are definitely looking at that. I think the number one thing that also needs to happen if you want to see trade in molecules, whether it's hydrogen or ammonia or any other vector, is that we need to have an agreed upon global standard for certification. And when I say that, I just mean that we need to agree on the well to tank, or the well to wheel, or the well to wake. We need to agree on how we assess the emissions and how we determine an emissions intensity number. So we don't talk about blue, we don't talk about green. Doesn't matter really what color it is. It's what kind of emissions were created when you made that product, and to have that on a certificate. And then each region, each country, they can have their own regulations. They can set their standards as they would like to, but we would know from the certification what we're buying. So we're comparing apples to apples. And I think recently there was a blue ammonia shipment from Saudi to Japan, which was TUV provided the certificate, and it literally just said blue ammonia. There were no other characteristics. And obviously we need to get to a point where not only are we having the emissions intensity on that certificate, but some basic other elements of ESG. Was it produced by prison labor? Was it produced by slave labor? What kind of governance was in place? And I think those will be very basic in the beginning, and potentially, get more refined. And different areas like the EU may have higher standards than others, but it will continue to I think, become more and more expansive to include all of the elements to compare apples to apples. I also think it's really important to not harm the people who have not created the problem, right? So the global South has not made global warming a problem. It is the global North that has created the situation that we're in. And so any of these solutions that we have, which would have a higher price for energy for these populations, we need to find a way to offset that for them. And I think that one way that IMO is looking at it, which is the International Maritime Organization, is to have a levy, and then to use that to help help the global South to build and become a part of the hydrogen economy, so that they can actually make green fuels that are used by the shipping industry. This is something that is just perfect as a first product to build the infrastructure for a much more complex economy, which can help a lot of countries to really expand in a healthy way. So I think those types of regulations are really important. I'm very surprised that most countries don't seem to make a distinction on power costs. I think it would be quite obvious to charge individuals, households, and when it comes to electricity or fuel or water even, to charge them a different price for a small amount. And once they're using an egregious amount, it's a much higher price. So if you have a house that's 50,000 square kilometers or meters, you're going to pay more to heat it. That just makes sense to me. And not a lot of countries have actually used that. I lived in Hong Kong and they did that. And I thought it was very a really just intelligent way to make sure that the poorest are not yet again hurt the hardest by what we've done ourselves.
Yeah, Lisha, thanks a lot for that interesting perspective. And now, handing over to Hamed, who said that, the question is, do you agree with that? And also, I think another aspect which you brought up, I think we haven't discussed, is that actually the supply chain perspective, right? Because you said it's not only an isolated view of putting the hydrogen plant and everything is changing, but it's kind of more an end-to-end perspective. And yeah, I would be very interested in kind of hearing your view on regulation and public sector involvement.
Yes, happy to do. Like I said, the role of the public sector is crucial, and I mean it, because when having a look on what exactly are we wanting to accomplish here, it's building up this hydrogen ecosystem or the hydrogen economy. So if you say hydrogen economy, for me, it entails a lot of constituents. Just look at the oil economy, for example, the way we know it, or the way we are looking at the oil economy right now. This is a work of more than 100 years. Yeah? Gas industry, 50, 60 years. So this has been developed over decades. And we are standing at the very start of the hydrogen economy. And for that reason, of course, you can and you must not do it without the public sector. And just to make one point, the public sector is of course very important to set the boundary conditions, to give you a clarity on the framework. And that's not only it. It goes way beyond that, because, for example, you also have to build up this economy with purpose-oriented funding. It's very important to add that qualification, because it's not just about giving money from the state to the players in order to make sure that they can build up this hydrogen economy. It's much more than that. And it's not only framework conditions and purpose-oriented funding. It goes again beyond that, because the active role of the public sector can, for example, start where you initiate contacts, where you go into international coordination, where you de-risk investments with guarantees, for example, where you also make sure that the regulation is not only enabling, but also holistic. Means it makes no sense if you have a regulation A in Austria, regulation B in Germany, regulation C in Czech Republic, regulation D in Belgium. It all needs to be made of one piece, and that's for me one of the major challenges that regulation needs to tackle. How can we make sure that we can, right from the very beginning, build up this hydrogen economy as something which is at least European? And I would even go so far to say that the hydrogen economy is way more than that. It's a global development that we are currently in, so it needs to fit together. But probably for the beginning, it's too much that I'm asking for if I say that you need to have a consistent global picture. But at least we should have a consistent European picture. And there, when you go into the single elements, it becomes then tricky, because of course you have different views on different things when it comes to how to import, where to import, what is actually then the differentiator when it comes to the question, when is hydrogen actually green? And what does it mean from the regions, for the regions from which I import it? So this all needs to be put into a frame that is, as I said, enabling, but also holistic in such a way that, and I'm repeating myself, I know, but in such a way that regulation and the public sector, it's starting its journey from the very beginning until we can speak about something that, you know, it is mature or almost mature. And still we need some rules, because I think one thing that I would like to add is we should not go into this mistake to transfer all the rules that we know, for example, from natural gas into building up this hydrogen economy. This is not going to be possible. There are some good things that we can take over from the natural gas industry, since it is a mature industry, but it is going to be required that we also generate some new elements and rules that are only fitting into the current phase of the hydrogen economy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hamid, for this one as well. And I think, you know, you touched, as well as Alicia, also into interesting questions around global collaboration. I think we'll come to that a bit later in the course of our webinar today. The next topic is really looking at kind of the demand side and how we believe that the customers overall should change. I mean, a simple example, you know, me as a European, whenever I go into an air-conditioned office here, I look first at the temperature, because it's freezingly cold for me, right? And try to turn it up at least by 3 to 4 degrees until I feel comfortable. And I think in Europe we had same challenges in winter, where people need to get used to kind of also lower the temperatures. And my impression is that from a global discussion, quite often people think they can continue living their lives as they've done before. Instead of, you know, using oil and gas, they use hydrogen or use electricity, something else. I just would be very much interested into your perspective on what do you think then the changes need to be on the demand side, on the customer, and how we can potentially achieve that based on your personal experience, things you have seen, some anecdotal evidence. I think that would be highly insightful. Yes, Carlos, again, back to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Jörg. At the end of the day, there is always someone at the end who is going to switch the lights on, or the engine of the car, or the the machinery in the factory, in a way or in another, that has at the end has the impact. Because as economists, I am an economist. It's the margin that actually drives the change. So I believe that the behavioral change and the set of incentives and the enablers that you have is what's going to be in reality shaping the energy transition which is required, that you have to deliver. So there is different things. You've touched upon a good number of them. I think the first thing you have to have is a policy or regulatory tools. From the demand side, how can you buy an EV or charge your car if you don't have clarity on how much you're going to pay for the electricity that comes into that, or the fiscal burden that your car is going to carry? So you need to enable those things, which will also enable the decision making from the consumer point of view. And for that, we've worked clearly. We have an EV charging policy, but we also have a district cooling, a water policy, and we have a recycled water policy. All of these things have an impact on the way that the consumers in Abu Dhabi can use electricity and water in a more efficient way. I mentioned before, we have a demand side management and energy efficiency strategy that has 9 different programs, which go from behavioral change and family residential use to street lighting. The purpose of this strategy is to reduce electricity consumption by 22% by 2030, and water by 30%. We also obviously have things like the clean energy certificates. If you want the company to invest, and demand clean electricity from the system, you need to make them be participants in this market. They cannot just be witnessing how things happen, and they cannot collaborate or participate of any kind. So you need to enable, the earmarking of electrons to make sure that they can achieve, their corporate goals through the regulations that we have in place in the Emirate. It was mentioned before about carbon pricing. I would also add, the whole tariff structure of electricity and water, and in general fuels and energy of all kinds. Price signals are fundamental to change the behavior of individuals. Why would you, if it's not because you have a very big heart or a very big brain, why would you change your behavior if it doesn't cost you any money? If it's, if there is no economic reward. So we need to make sure that we put the regulatory changes to the tariffs, which will enable, the proper energy efficiency and demand side management approach that is required, to manage your energy consumption. This in return will also allow the investors to adapt the investment strategy to make sure that it is compatible not only with the demand side, but very importantly, equally from the supply side. Why would you, charge your EV car in this region at night when there is no sunshine, when the potentially cheapest electricity comes in the middle of the day? And you should be able to take advantage of the natural resource that, as a conscious consumer, an informed consumer, but also financially liable consumer, can take advantage of the resources that are available for you, depending what kind of jurisdictions you're at. So all of these together, I think, build a picture of, enablers, which is either information, access to information, participation in the debates, and the regulatory changes that will allow you, for instance, to switch from your old AC to a more convenient but also more economic district cooling system in your house, if you have the opportunity to do it, which is the case of Abu Dhabi, or charge your EV car according to a set of rules and regulations. There is the information that you need to provide to the consumers and to the investors by means of producing long-term forecasts which allow them to see what the future is going to bring and be prepared for that. And finally, you need to produce the price signals and the incentives that will take you there over a period of time. You know, they cannot be abrupt. You cannot just drive people crazy, or you cannot drive businesses out of business because you suddenly change the tariff. But you definitely need to, you know, make this process predictable in terms of allowing you know, all the stakeholders to adapt to the change and to actually take advantage of the change. Because as I said, there is plenty of opportunities that will be surfacing as the energy transition continues to mature.
Yeah, Carlo, thanks a lot for those very specific examples. And now also again over to Alicia. What needs to change on the demand side in your view?
I think that there are a couple of different categories on the demand side where we can help to make consumers or businesses make better choices. So one thing that I ran into last year, I had set up a charity called Operation Antifreeze, and that was to help Ukraine make it through the war with green energy solutions. And one of the things that we found was that 50% of the hospital electricity was used for lighting. And the EU gave a 5-6 million euro gift to Ukraine to switch over to LED. And the entire country switched over to LED. And these hospitals are using half of the energy they were using before. There are so many quick wins like that. And I think that those are obviously the ones that we should push, you know, as quickly as we can, because that doesn't even impact the consumer. I mean, that is a very easy one. At the same time, we don't want to only focus on that. And I think we saw with a lot of the media campaigns from oil and gas companies about 10 or 15 years ago, there was a lot of talk about consumers, you know, using less and basically trying to shift the blame to consumers and to shift the changes and the what needs to be done to only to consumers, and for consumers to pay for this increased cost of greener options. And I think that really there are real things that need to be done as well. And if you look at the shipping industry, which has been analyzing how they can reduce inefficiencies, and so they will need less green fuels. And then they also, but they are worried about companies only focusing on that, because they actually do need to switch to green fuels. At the same time, if they're put in their inefficiencies are reduced, and they can make up a lot of the cost by just needing less fuel, then it's a lot easier total cost of ownership conversation. So the ways that we can get people or companies to change is, I think, to make it appealing for them or less painful for them by combining things together. And one of those is, how do we get them the energy that they need for a lower price or even a lower amount? And I think a lot of different industries are looking at that, and that's very important. But I do think that we can't rely only on a reduction of demand, especially because we add another 1 billion people every 12 years. So we're obviously going to continue growing. So we need to do that, and we also need to shift to green molecules from fossil fuels.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alicia, for that one. And handing over to Hamed, is it only going to be an efficiency game in the first place, or is there anything more to that? And also, what's your perspective from the demand side?
Yeah, it's a mixture of many things, I must say, because when it comes to efficiency, I heard it the other day. It's a very nice expression, is that the best energy and the cheapest energy is the one that you don't use. So I think we all agree on that. And when it comes to, again, the market side, so when do you build up a market? You only build up a market when you see sufficient demand for that. And I was saying 160 gray today, 160,000 tons green in 2030, 635, 1.8 million in 2040, just in Austria. Where does it come from? It of course comes from changes on the demand side. It all starts with fuel switches or feedstock switches that we are currently wanting to support, but also in the long run, it's a lot about change in technology, which also means investing in this changes of technology. So that's one of the big changes of behavior, so to say, that we are seeing, and that is going to happen. And when you look at the question, why do you actually switch? So in a real, let's say, pure economic world or frame, it is you either want to benefit from incentives or from rewards, or or you would like to avoid sanctions or costs or penalties. And this is a development that is already happening now. When you just look at all the rules that are being set by the EU Commission, just the RED III, for example, that is going to significantly change the use of hydrogen in those cases where you already have a large amount of gray hydrogen that is currently being used. So you have quotas that you need to use green hydrogen instead of gray. And this is not going to happen in 2050. It's going to happen very soon, so in 6.5 years. So this is a change of behavior or offtake that is, of course, going to impact our work, first of all, but also which will also help the hydrogen economy to get into existence and to be built up. And again, nothing goes without the demand side. And maybe just another example that I know from my personal life, how you can impact the energy transition by your personal behavior, just as a household, so to say. I am driving an electric car, and what I learned at the very beginning is that you have to wave goodbye to your old habits. You know, when you have a diesel car, you can drive over 1,000 kilometers without refueling your car. That's very convenient and makes your trips just shorter time-wise. And what you have to do now is you have to recharge your car every 250 kilometers. That's very new. That's in the beginning not really convenient, but you start to make the best out of it because you go for a coffee or you do other things that you are supposed to do, or you just take a very necessary break during a very long trip. So in short words, it is very often required that you just wave goodbye to your old habits, which does not always necessarily have to mean that things are getting bad or worse.
Good. Yeah, thanks for that interesting perspective. Now, last but not least, to our final topic around international collaboration. Obviously, you know, we understand that the large CO2 powerhouses, large CO2 producers such as China, the US, Europe, and also Japan, the large industrialized nations, need to be at the forefront of this one, and that it can't be an isolated effort. And then, you know, as we are coming to the end of our webinar, from each of you also, you know, short statement on how you see that and how you see that, you know, either being successful in the business model of the company you're working for. Also, Carlos, and starting with you, and how do you see that as being important from a regulatory perspective?
Thank you, Jörg. You referred to the international behavior or being part of an international debate?
Collaboration in terms of, you know, net zero, potential regulatory efforts which have to be harmonized and so on.
Well, I think nothing is meaningful unless you're part of a collective effort. You can try as hard as you want in the UAE or in Abu Dhabi or in Germany or in Austria or in Argentina or the US, it doesn't matter. It is not going to make a difference. What is going to make a difference is the sharing of efforts, and the sharing, as Alicia said before, to some extent also important, the sharing of the burden. So I think what we have now so far is a very clear commitment from a good number of nations to be carbon neutral by 2050. Some like China or India are extending the period a little bit beyond into 2060 or 70, which is also, very complicated as they have probably a bigger effort to make because they come from a more polluting and energy trend, emissions trend. But all of these means that the efforts have to be shared and the approach has to be comparable. It was also mentioned to what extent certification for green or blue or pink or turquoise, you name it, hydrogen has to be recognizable across the board. The efforts of an industry, the efforts of a jurisdiction, the effort of a policymaker alone is only going to deliver very small benefits. The discussing, the agreeing, and the common action to share, the policies and to actually be comparable across the board is the key to making real progress. You cannot do anything unless you're part of a system that is geared to change. And change is precisely what we need to ensure. So for that, we do engage in the GCC region. We do have, compromises, at global scale through our national interim contribution. We have the COP that is coming up in the UAE very soon. All of these are shared efforts which will deliver the benefits for the global community. And if we don't get, to understand each other's role and to be fully committed at, personal, regional, national, and global level, at the end of the day, we will be like diluting all our efforts. So for that, I believe that the role of regulators, the role of policymakers, at the end of the day, the role of governments is fundamental to bring that understanding to the board. And just a small anecdote. I also have an EV. I had my first EV in 2018, some time back. It was one of the first that was commercially available. I actually loved the fact that I never had to go to the gas station, because now you're driving, it's never the right time to stop in the gas station because you want to go home, because you need to do some shopping, because I'm in a hurry, but you need to invest 20 minutes in refueling your car. I refueled my battery every day at home in my office, and it was great because it was always full. So only when I really had to go far away, beyond 200 to 300 kilometers, that could become an issue. But for your, for your life, for your everyday life, it was a blessing. And I just think that not all of your habits are a cost. Actually, some of those habits, as we've said before, are actual benefits. And this was one of them.
Good, great. No, thanks a lot for that, Carlos. Then Alicia, also coming back, you mentioned before the topic, I would say carbon taxation, right? A carbon tax, also creating some standards, a bit like, the refrigerators, where you have kind of the science, how much energy consumption there is, to make that comparable. Also, I guess handing over to you on what your perspective is very briefly on international collaboration.
Sure. I think we're already collaborating internationally to devise ISO standards for hydrogen and for ammonia. G7, G20, EC, UAE, a number of big players have already agreed that they would like to have the same ISO standard. And so obviously ISO has a standard for gray hydrogen, but you have much more complication when you're trying to collect the total emissions from beginning to end for a life cycle of a product. So that has actually already been mostly created and mostly agreed upon by all of the major players, METI as well. And I think the difference is we don't expect immediately for every region or country to have the exact same regulatory structure. So we don't expect them to have the same carrots and sticks. We don't expect them to even have the same level that they would consider to be clean hydrogen or clean ammonia. We do expect to get rid of those colors, though, and never talk about them again. And the other one is that we also assume that there will be mutual recognition. So one of the things that are going in is that we all use the same process. We all use the same math to get to the emissions calculation, to get to that intensity figure. But then we have mutual recognition of how different countries decide to implement that information, or to put their floors and ceilings on what is acceptable to bring into their country. I think that that's really important to get anything going. I also think book and claim can be very helpful when you're at this nascent stage of building out a market globally. You may have the ability in one part of the world to do something that you don't have in another part of the world, and the ability to have book and claim actually is very helpful, so that your net, reducing greenhouse gases. So I think those two are extremely important, and thankfully, I believe we'll be announcing at COP some information about that that should really form a foundation for trade. Because if we don't know what we have, I mean, at the end of the day, a hydrogen molecule, ammonia molecule, they're identical. So we need to have a way to know how they were made, so that we know what kind of emissions went into the making of them. And that's just necessary to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, Lisha, thank you very much. Now handing over to Hamed as the last person on the global collaboration. So what, in your view, should be the priorities and where should be the focus?
As I was saying, Jörg, hydrogen or the hydrogen economy is a brilliant example for global collaboration, because hydrogen economy needs to build up based on partnering into, let's say, all the directions that make sense. And as I also said, it's not just an initiative of a couple of players that are kicking forward a movement. It's something that is really based on long-term collaboration, and long-term collaboration means also long-term commitments on all levels, and this is a very important part of building up this hydrogen economy, because sooner or later you will have to invest a lot of money into building up this hydrogen economy. Just to look at the upstream side, for example, we are talking about multi-billion investments that all the players need to make sure that these investments are happening, and these investments at the same time have to be bankable. And they are based on this long international collaboration. We also have the element of long-term commitments, as I said, on all levels: buyers, producers, infrastructure operators, science, politics. This is again a very important item that needs to happen, because you cannot just build up a hydrogen economy with contracts that run 1 or 2 years. You need to go into a way longer duration of contracts, finding the necessary pricing system between all the partners. This is going to be a bilateral thing, of course, but finding the right pricing system in order to make sure that these multi-billion investments are getting bankable, and that it all makes sense from an economic point of view. And for that, the basis is this international collaboration.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we're coming to an end of our webinar. I was actually very glad to hear that on the 3 topics which we covered today, on regulation policies, as well as also demand side and cultural change, as well as international collaboration, despite the fact that we had 3 different speakers with very different backgrounds, reaching from the public sector to kind of, so to say, startups, starting to work in the renewables business, that there's actually broad agreement on a lot of topics. Therefore, thank you very much, Alicia, Ahmed and Carlos for participating to that. I hope that our viewers also enjoyed the session today. And for the ones that were not able to watch that session today, the session will be available on the ADSW live platform for the ones also that would like to watch this again. Thank you very much again to everybody. Thank you.